Hi, this is Dee Kayalar with USC's Career Development Center. Welcome to Alumni Zoom Trips, our virtual webcast series with USD alumni experts that provides a glimpse into the life of our alumni in the aftermath of the pandemic. The program is co-hosted with the Office of Alumni Relations. Rene Hanna holds a master's in international relations from USD and JD from American University Washington College of Law. She has started her career serving as Senator Dianne Feinstein's liaison and advisor on national and international drug matters. She has later served as Deputy Chief of Staff at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, where she has advised on policies related to national and border security, trade, travel, and commerce. Most recently, she served as law clerk for the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Renee, it's a pleasure to see you today. How are you?
Hi, Dee. I'm well. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for joining us. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm curious how you got started in your career and how your USC degree has prepared you for your professional life.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to say hello to all my fellow students and graduates of USD. It was really a wonderful university and time in my life. And I think that the faculty at USD is excellent, and they've carried on to be both friends and advisors now throughout my career. So I think that you're well placed if you're at USD, and it's great that the university is doing these types of webcasts to help students throughout this time and throughout the pandemic. And just as everyone tries to navigate jobs, it's always something that people are curious about, whichever sector they're going into. So it's really great that you're doing these webcasts now. I'll start off by saying that at each point in my career, it was important to take a little bit of some calculated risks that made me a little bit uncomfortable at the time to get where I wanted to be, and to really be humble and be flexible to generally get to the area of study and career where I wanted to be, but to be very open to the exact position. So while my resume built, and you mentioned some of the areas I worked in, I really started knowing that I wanted to work in government. I want to serve the public and be in public service. I really had a lot of admiration for Senator Dianne Feinstein. I had just followed her career and been a student following the news, and really enjoyed her style and bipartisanship. So one day after I had graduated from the University of California, Irvine for undergrad, I just called the office. I sent my resume over in advance, and I called and said, "Hi, I'm Rene Hanna. I sent my resume." And they said, "Oh, great. Are you calling about the position for staff assistant that was advertised?" I said, "Oh, sure. I sure am." So they put me on hold for a while, and they eventually connected me to a gentleman who was the regional director at the time, and who is now a longtime mentor and friend. And so long story short, I came in an interview for that position. I didn't hear for a very long time, which I can say for a few of my positions that I didn't hear right away. And I think we all can kind of doubt ourselves and say, did we get the position? How did we do in the interview? This or that. But sometimes the process just takes a little bit of time. It's a little bit deliberate. So I started as a staff assistant, and one of my lessons to myself throughout my career is just always to do the job that you are hired to do as best as you can. And I think that as time goes on, people will recognize if you are enjoying your position and if you are diligent and doing well in that role. And so I started as staff assistant. 2.5 months later, the assistant field representative position opened up, and I moved into that role and ended up staying with Senator Feinstein for about 8 years, which, as you noted, ended up in Washington, D.C., working on cross-border narcotics and drug and law enforcement issues. So started as staff assistant there in San Diego, and ended up in Washington, D.C., and never intended ending up in Washington, D.C., but it was incredibly rewarding to work there and to serve in the Senate, and to go on and to do some other things. So I think that's the big picture. Start small, and you never know where you're going to end up. My education at USD, I knew I wanted more education. I wanted to go on to graduate school. I had been working, as I said, for Senator Feinstein, and it was at a time when cross-border issues were of great relevance and being covered a great deal in the news. And I started to study them just on my own. And I learned about the program at USD and international relations. And I did also know that they had a cross-border element to that program. And so I reached out to the director at the time, and I saw that the deadline was fast approaching, and I had not taken the entrance exams yet. So I just called the director of the program there at USD. I went in and I met with her. I told her of my interest. She told me what it would take on the exam and what they look for in candidates. So I started to study. I took the exam. I applied. And it worked out great. It's really nice that USD offers a night program so that folks can work and continue their careers, and also advance their education at the same time.
Thanks so much for that, Renee. And I heard a lot of things, but primarily the importance of really getting out of your comfort zone. And you provide a great example of that when you mentioned the cold call that you'd made, made to Dianne Feinstein's office. And then again, in your interest in applying for graduate school with USD and making those calls and just engaging with folks and really persevering and working hard to pursue your professional and academic goals. So that's really inspiring. And how did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in government and law?
Well, I think at a very young age, we all know what interests us. And sometimes that manifests in different ways throughout our lives. And one may have 2 or 3 different careers. For me, I knew very early on, I loved history, I loved government. And it took my high school AP government teacher, Mrs. Ormsby. She sent me to a program called Girls State. And each school in California, I believe, sends one representative, and you form a mock government. And I absolutely loved it. So Mrs. Ormsby kind of saw that I enjoyed government. I talked to her about wanting to one day work in government. And she sent me to this program. And I think it was both being able to participate in that program, which I enjoyed, but also for the first time recognizing that, hey, somebody else recognizes in me that this is an area that I like and I could grow in. So to this day, I'm really grateful. I sent Mrs. Ormsby a little note a few years ago, just saying, it's kind of because of you that you gave me this confidence to go on and to identify that this is really an area that I'd like to grow in. So it's from a young age, and obviously, a lot happened from my high school AP government class beyond that. But it was in high school really when I realized that I wanted to work in government. And then I went on to study political science and sociology at UC Irvine. And from there, I worked at a small boutique government relations group, and then started working for Senator Feinstein. Wanted to return to San Diego, came home and started working for her a short time later.
And what aspects of the USD's Master's in International Relations really piqued your interest? I mean, you mentioned that it was an executive program, classes, there were flexible hours, classes being offered at night. What are other elements of the program that really spoke to your interest and curiosity?
Sure. Well, like I said, I think that the flexibility of allowing me to stay in my job and also pursue graduate studies was most appealing. Not every university in San Diego offered such a program. I knew I wanted a master's and not a PhD because I always had the thought in my mind that I would go on to law school. And so the fact that there was a master's program, which was 1 to 2 years, a little bit shorter in duration than a PhD, was really helpful in that decision to me. And also the, like I said, the cross-border studies program that was going on at USD and some of the research that folks in Washington were using to make decisions and to understand the context of some of the conflict and trade relations in Mexico was very interesting to me. But the way that USD's program was organized also forced me in a good way to learn about different matters. So we had classes on covert operations in the CIA that I know that some of my classmates went on to be interested in intelligence work. I got to learn about China and Russia and how their governments were formed, which obviously has helped me to understand global issues a little bit better. So it was a great program. It was rather quick, but the program, the courses were relevant to what was going on, and I think just allowed us all to think in a more worldly manner.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And how would you describe your experience working at the U.S. Senate and the President's office?
Well, I was just so honored to be able to go to Washington and to work in the Senate. I was young, but I felt like the roles there both allowed me to grow a great deal. Like I said, I never intended necessarily to move to Washington, D.C. I was very happy working for the senator in San Diego. But a day after she visited San Diego, I received a phone call that there was an opportunity. She was taking over chairmanship of the Senate Caucus on International Narcotics Control. And I had just by fluke been talking to her about related issues the day before when she was in San Diego at a luncheon. And so not knowing that that was going to be an issue she was interested in, or she was taking over this committee, I received a call from the chief of staff, and sometimes when you don't have a lot of time to make a decision, you just go with your gut. So I spoke to my family about it, and I think within the month I was in Washington. I went there and looked for an apartment the next week, and then transitioned fully within a month. And it was fascinating, learning how a committee gets up and going, how to run hearings, working in a bipartisan fashion, deciding who the witnesses are going to be at a hearing, the opening statements, the language, working on legislation. I was able to write a law that's still on the books. And that was just really interesting, working with legislative counsel. And I kind of also think that that fueled my desire to go to law school a bit, because I wanted to know, if I ever write a law again, I want to be able to know exactly the meaning of the words I put in there, and the context within the legal framework. And I wanted to be able to 100% cover and be able to see things to the end on my own. So anyways, it was fascinating. It was such an honor. And Senator Feinstein, I just really just have so much gratitude towards her, because she really trains you to be diligent and to anticipate questions, to be on your toes, and to work hard. As hard as folks work in her office, you're never working as hard as the senator. And she was always well read. She was always prepared. And I think as a young woman in government and politics, that was a lesson to me. You have to be prepared. Anyone has to be prepared. But I think, especially as a young woman, you have to really know your stuff when you go into a room, and do all your homework ahead of time. And, there's always a learning curve. You're always learning. You're not ever going to know everything. But the things that you can know in advance and you can anticipate, the onus is on you to do that work ahead of time. So I really enjoyed working in the Senate for Senator Feinstein, and was really honored to go on and work for the Executive Office of the President at the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And my now longtime mentor was the director at the time. And again, a little situation where I knew I wanted to go over and work for him, and there was a position that I knew was becoming available. And so one of my friends and mentors of my own age said, you should call him and invite him to coffee. And I said, he's the director of this program. I can't just, who am I to call this person and invite him to coffee? So I did, and he graciously
That's
met
it.
with me and said, knew of my interest and asked me, well, is that the only position you'd be interested in? And in my head, I thought, well, that's the only position I know is available. And long story short, I didn't hear for several months, and ultimately got a phone call, and they were offering me an even better position that I didn't know was going to become available. So sometimes there's a reason for the wait. And I'm just most grateful for that experience. Learned a lot about the interagency process. ONDCP, as it's called, really brings together the different agencies within the government and looks at their budgets and looks at how they're going to focus on substance misuse and drug control efforts.
Mhm.
And so it was really interesting to me to see both the entities within the White House and how they operated, but also all the different agencies and how to bring together a whole of government approach to different policy issues. And obviously now, sadly, the overdose issues are really at a height, in that work under President Obama's drug strategy really is advancing and moving, and will be very important and ongoing in the Biden administration as we look towards how to improve treatment and recovery in the United States.
Thank you, Renee. And that's actually a great segue into my next question, which is who do you need to be? What skills, what experience, qualifications would someone need to have to qualify for positions in government?
Well, it's certainly very broad, and there are positions in all different respects, amongst all the federal agencies and the White House divisions. There's really a place for everybody. You would generally go to the website usajobs.gov to apply for a career position. So within the government, there are both career and what are called generally Schedule C or political appointments. If you're working specifically for a president or an administration, you would apply through White House personnel for a Schedule C position. And then separately from that is generally the usajobs.gov route for career positions, which do not expire at the end of a presidential term. And so it really depends on what one's interests are. I would encourage folks, if they're interested in working in Washington, to go ahead and look at fellowships, find an area that they're interested in, and look to come for a summer. A lot of the universities, I'm sure USD has one as well, have summer programs. Go to Washington, see if you like it. The networking, during COVID, it's obviously very different. But next summer, the summer thereafter, think about coming out to Washington, and there's really an association or a committee or an agency focused on the issues that one would like to work on if they are interested in government. So I think it's a great experience. One thing I didn't know until I graduated law school, and I was back and forth a little bit between Washington and when I came here to work for Justice Banky at the Court of Appeal in San Diego, is that the law schools, and I think the undergraduate as well, and I'm sure the master's program, the university as a whole can offer reciprocity within the career services offices. So you can apply to, say, a university in Washington, D.C., if you're interested in moving there. USD can work with their career service office for you to see if they can offer you services as a USD graduate. So that's something that, there are many universities in Washington. There's George Washington University, Georgetown, American University, Catholic University. There are a number of them. And so you can talk to your career services officer here in San Diego about if that's an option. And that's a great way to gain access to their job postings and just general guidance to be able to go into the career service office. I encourage people to do that even if formally they're not able to form a relationship with that career service office. Go in the office and see what postings they have and see if that can be helpful.
Okay. So exploring those reciprocity arrangements between across the different career services departments of universities, right?
Right.
Particularly
Absolutely.
Washington, D.C. based, yeah. And also, what I'm also hearing is that looking into more internship type or project-based short-term type of opportunities first, just to make sure that those types of positions and experiences are truly aligned with one's experiences and
Sure,
passion.
and it certainly depends on the level.
Mhm.
Right. If an individual has a PhD and they're going in, they may be looking at a higher level. But coming right out of undergrad or right out of graduate school, I think that a person should be very open and you know their interests, but be humble in your search. You never know what one thing is going to lead to. Go to the place, build relationships. I can't tell you how critical that is. You never know, build relationships in a genuine way, but you never know who's noticing you and who's noticing your passion for an area you're working on or your hard work. And, those friends may know of an opportunity one day that'll be helpful to you. And I can't tell you how many times that I've had folks who were friends and colleagues and I never anticipated anything from, but really helped me kind of get to the next step, either with brainstorming or reaching out to people on my behalf. It's
Or
really
letting you know of opportunities that you didn't even know existed, right?
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely. And there are a number of websites that you can go to for entry level and other types of jobs. The Senate, you can go to senate.gov and all of the job postings are available there. There are a few subscription-based websites for jobs in Washington, D.C. One is called Tom Manitos. There's also District Daybook, a few others that you can subscribe to, and they generally list the position. And then if you subscribe, you can go on to get more detail. But even without a subscription, you can generally read and say, oh, it's a job as communications director for a Republican senator, and then you can just search the Senate database for types of jobs in that area. So a subscription isn't always necessary, but a lot of the schools have subscriptions to those services, so one doesn't necessarily need to subscribe on their own.
100%. And what would your top advice be for those considering a law degree?
Really want it, really want to be a lawyer. I think often with the law, folks want to do it because it's just something they want to do and they don't know how to take next steps. Law school is very hard. It challenges you. It changes the way that we think about things. And a unique experience because I was working full time and going at night. And again, was glad that there was that type of program, but it's really tough. And then passing the bar, generally when one graduates, yay, you've graduated, hooray, you're done. With law school, it's different. You have to pass the bar exam, and that's challenging and can lead to time away from your career. So I think that if you want to go to law school, study hard for the LSAT, talk to folks, see if you can attend some law classes, think about what you want to do afterwards. Is that going to be compatible with your lifestyle? I'm glad I went to law school. It's one of those things I always wanted to do. I really enjoyed the study of it and the education and the mindset and the way it challenges me to think. And I've enjoyed working for both judges that I've worked for now. And who knows, I think that, even if not practicing law in a very traditional sense, that having that JD really is helpful to my career. But, my experience may be different than another's because I do work in government and I have a passion for policy work in government. And so, of course, a JD is going to be compatible with a career on that trajectory. But it's something to really think about. Don't go to law school just because it sounds fancy, and just go to law school if you really want to be a lawyer and you want to practice law, because it's a huge financial commitment. It can be very rewarding, but it's difficult and it's trying, and even the strongest of people will really find challenge with it. But it's great if you want to do it. I highly encourage it. But again, go to those classes, find out really what it is that you want to do with going to law school. for your
Yeah,
law.
and for those people who are already in it, any practical tips and advice for them?
Sure, study hard, do your reading,
Mhm.
and don't doubt yourself too much. Everybody, I think law school is designed, especially the first year, um, to kind of make people doubt themselves, and that's okay. That's normal. You are not any different than your colleagues in your class. Um, just continue to work hard. You know, it's very intimidating when you first start. I remember my first reading for law school taking me about 6 hours to complete. And you know, when you start, there's legal jargon. And I remember just trying to read a few sentences and then going to Black's Law Dictionary and figuring out, okay, well, I'm supposed to read this and comprehend it, but I don't even know what some of these words
Or,
mean. Um,
mhm.
and so, you know, just give yourself time, be patient with yourself. Don't doubt yourself. It will go so fast and you will miss law school. As hard as it is, you will miss law school. And so I think, you know, going to school at night and working during the day, I didn't think how quickly it was going. And so I would tell myself retrospectively, you know, take time to be with your classmates a little bit more. I made some great friends in law school, but just given the time constraints, maybe not as many. I didn't get time to really appreciate all of my colleagues in class. So make sure you do that. You're going to be working with some of these people, and just be commiserating over the bar exam, or leaning on them to find out about their area law in the future to see if it's something you want to explore. You know, you may go in thinking you want to do environmental law or labor law, or be a prosecutor or a defense attorney or something of that sort. And then you try it out and you think, maybe not. And you're going to have to talk to your colleagues about, hey, what are you doing? How do you like that? How's that balance with your life? Especially now, you know, as we're growing our family, balance is something that's important. And balance maybe wasn't something that I was thinking about when I started law school, because I didn't have to at that time. Um, so just enjoy it. It will pass, and you will miss law school, believe it or not. And you're doing an amazing job, even if you don't always feel that you're doing an amazing job. You're doing well.
So I'm just going to stay there in the, you mentioned work-life balance, and that's really, I'm in that same boat right now. So any tips for working mothers out there who are trying to balance work and family, particularly amid the pandemic?
Sure. So I'm a novice at this. My baby is 4 months old, so I need the advice myself. Um, but I think having a great partner, everyone's going through a challenging time right now. You know, everyone's working remotely for the most part. Well, during my pregnancy, both my husband and I were working remotely from home, and it's hard, right? You have to have the self-discipline to be online, to be really thoughtful in your work, which requires critical thinking when there's a whole host of things going on, right? We don't have the quiet environment of our office, and there might be trucks outside, and you have to, the kitchen's going on, and your husband's
Work
on
with
call with your partner,
disruption.
your roommate, there's a call going on, there's a fire alarm, whatever it may be, which actually happened a number of times when we were working from home. So it requires a lot of self-discipline. And, for those of us who really thrive on the interaction in an office, and the thought process, and, bouncing ideas off of our colleagues, and the social interaction of being at work, it's really hard and it's isolating. It's also rewarding in the sense that, on a separate track, obviously, that you can have that time for critical thinking when all these other things aren't going on. There aren't the interruptions. So you can focus on writing and really get into it in a different way. But it's hard, I don't think we can ignore kind of the emotional toll of knowing what's going on in the world, and then the isolation for folks who are practicing social distancing. It's really a tough time that will pass. So I think, it requires a lot more discipline than we had before. And also, you have to just kind of take care of yourself and reach out to people, and build that social network and support in another way, because you're not going to the office and you're not seeing your colleagues and friends. And it requires a little bit more self-made structure and having phone calls with your colleagues, checking in, over talking things a little bit. So anyways, that was my experience just being home. But you asked me about being a mom, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Our little guy's 4 months old, like I said. And, I really regard all those mothers out there who have been doing this and been going into the office and taking care of their babies, feeding and eating and sleeping and all of these needs. And it's really a challenge. So I'm in the boat right now where I'm taking advice. I don't feel well prepared to be giving it. I'll just say that I have a great partner in it, and we take turns. And, if there is some silver lining right now, I think this time's allowed for a little bit more focus on family. But it's challenging. It's challenging to be home at work. It's challenging emotionally to know what folks are going through in the world right now. I'm hopeful for a brighter day, and that everyone just hangs in there and tries to stay positive. And
Well, thank you for sharing that. And also, I think you've mentioned a number of helpful tips for remote work too, in terms of sustaining that self-motivation and that internal discipline. In creating that supportive structure and network, and making sure that we are connecting with others and we are creating those connection points, and also making this conscious effort towards self-care, right? As we're trying to work amid the disruptions. So thank you for those helpful tips. And then I have two final questions. And one is, given the fact that we are remote, would you have any advice for our, graduating seniors or alumni who are preparing for virtual job interviews?
Sure, it's really tough, right? You don't have that human interaction, and it's hard to kind of gauge in an online or Zoom interview, how you're doing. The interview, the folks giving the interview aren't in the same room, so they're not bouncing off one another in the same ways as an in-office interview. Same advice I would provide for an in-person interview: be very prepared. I think that your preparation and appearance is a little bit more, just as important, rather, as an in-person interview. Have your notes upright for you to read throughout the interview, so you're not looking down. Where you're looking is important. And I think know that folks understand that things are just different right now. So to the extent that you can provide your materials in advance so that they can read it over, to the extent that people who can maybe put in a good word. Don't bombard the employer with recommendations before you interview, but maybe, if there's one critical person that has a good relationship with that office, have them send over a note. So-and-so's interviewing today. I've worked with so-and-so in this capacity, if that exists. But, I think that there's a little bit more understanding from everyone right now. So don't be too critical of yourself when you're doing these online interviews. It's just a different time. And I think just preparation.
100%. All right, thank you. And then on a final note, can you tell me some of your favorite resources to get information and updates in your field? I'm thinking of like websites, blogs, influencers that you refer to often.
Sure. So I think in terms of websites for jobs, I think I mentioned a few. For the Washington, D.C. area, I would go to usajobs.gov. I like the Tom Manitos website as well, District Daybook. Use those career services offices. I had not thought about influencers. I'm a news junkie, so I'm on all the podcasts all day. I listen to NPR religiously. I constantly have the news on, and I'm switching amongst the stations to get varied news. I think, finding news at its source is really important right now. Reading the actual Senate reports, reading the reports from the states and different things are really critical. So maybe not as fun of an answer as you'd like. I think I'm a little too studious sometimes.
This is great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the social media portals have been great for both learning the news and learning how to make sourdough bread during the pandemic, right? It's varied at this time, but I think I encourage folks who are looking for a job to go to those. Senate.gov is a good one if you're looking to work on the Hill, and I believe the House of Representatives has a similar website as well. But utilize all the sites and make those contacts, network, find out who you know, use your professors. I know that a lot of the professors at USD take trips to Washington and take students with them. I've spoken to some of those groups when they've come to Washington, D.C. And so your professors can be a great resource. They may know folks that you can talk to informally about these positions.
Absolutely, right. And just, continue to keep those relationships, thriving and continue to cultivate those relationships.
Absolutely.
Rene, this has been absolutely delightful. I'd like to thank you so much on behalf of CDEV as well as Alumni Office for your time and insights today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. Take care.